Hey, I'm Di McQueen, licensed clinical social worker, family and addiction expert. I'm here with Dr. Brian Jackson, my longtime cohort who specializes in the field of addiction. Welcome to Healing Families Shattered by Addiction.
Di and I have worked with addicts, alcoholics, and their families for over 30 years combined. Our podcast and coaching programs focus on families who have a loved one suffering from addiction. Our experience has been that this disease affects families as much, if not more, than the addict or alcoholic.
Is your world spinning out of control? Are you codependent? Are you experiencing worry, loss of sleep, and difficulty concentrating? If so, you're in the right place. Brian and I have both personally lived it, learned it, and now we're going to teach you tools and techniques on how to get your life back that you thought was shattered by addiction. When addiction feels overwhelming, the right support can change everything. Recovery Keys, located in Ponte Vedra Beach, offers accredited residential and outpatient treatment for substance use and co-occurring mental health conditions. Unlock the keys to your recovery today. Visit recoverykeys.org or call 904-551-1394.
Okay, let's dive in. Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Brian Jackson. I am here with my partner, Diane McQueen, licensed clinical social worker, master's level certified addiction professional, and advanced art therapist. Art is accelerated resolution therapy. Hi, Di. How are you doing?
Hey, B, I am so well for a Thursday afternoon, but always a pleasure to do a podcast with you, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really, I really enjoy doing them. And, some of this stuff is real professional and personal to us. Di and I, a lot of times will evaluate people, in a child custody case or a criminal case. And sometimes we have to go to court. Sometimes we have to testify. And you see a wide range of things happening in people's lives that have a direct correlation to, their substance use. And so we had a little anecdote that we thought that we'd like to share with you. It's not very long, but I think it's very powerful in terms of its message. And since Di is a much better reader than I am, her glasses are way thicker than mine.
Exactly.
That she can go ahead and read this. We're laughing, but I mean, when you hear it, it's not, there's not a lot to laugh about, but I mean, it's not sad either. So, but I don't know, it just jumped out at us, and reminded us of our own personal experiences as professionals in the courtroom, and outside of the courtroom in our office, with families. So, with that, Miss Di,
You got it,
can
B.
you please read to us?
I sure will, and I'm certainly not a better reader, but I'm going to read this one. The courtroom was quiet that morning. A young man in his late 20s stood at the defense table, shoulders slightly slumped, hands clasped together. His record was already several pages long: possession, probation violations, petty theft, another case tied to drugs. But the judge wasn't looking at the young man. He was looking at the woman sitting in the front row, his mother. She had been in the same courtroom before. In fact, the bailiff quietly mentioned that he had seen her there nearly every hearing over the past 3 years, always in the same seat, always waiting. When the judge asked if someone wanted to speak before sentencing, she slowly stood up. Her voice shook at first. I know my son has broken the law, she said, and I know there has to be consequences, but I want you to know this isn't the boy I raised. She paused for a moment and looked back at her son. He was the kid who helped neighbors carry groceries. He played baseball. He used to tell me he wanted to be a fighter when he grew up. The room went silent. Then she said something that stayed with everyone in the courtroom. Your Honor, addiction doesn't just take my son, it took my entire family. That moment captures something we often miss when we talk about addiction in legal terms, medical terms, or policy terms. Behind nearly every case involving substance use, there is not just one person struggling. There's a mother who can't sleep. There's a father who feels he failed. There's a child who doesn't understand why their parents keep disappearing. Addiction may appear in court as an individual offense, but its impact is almost always family wide. And understanding that reality is critical if we want our justice systems, treatment systems, and communities to respond in ways that actually promote recovery. And there,
Yay, good reading. Good reading. Get an A. Get you a gold star.
oh well, thank you. Yeah, I only bobbled a few times there. That's pretty good for me.
But
But
I
the
think it's a very,
message is
very,
a big deal. The message.
yeah, I think the message is very, very powerful. Obviously, we're family and addiction experts. And so our focus after leaving the treatment world, working with, primarily people suffering from the illness, we decided that, you know what? Who's taking care of the families? Who's helping them navigate through this stuff? And so it's not that we don't work with people that do have an addiction problem, but the families really need some guidance. And the way that mother put it, like the father feels like a failure, and you know, it just sends a signal to me that alcohol and drugs are undefeated. Here you have a kid that will carry groceries for the neighbors, play baseball, everything's fine. And maybe through no fault of his own, he gets introduced to drugs and alcohol, and he is predisposed to addiction, and it just takes over his life. And so the dichotomy of looking at your child the way they were and the way they are is kind of heartbreaking. And the judicial system, is based a lot on punishment and restitution and not so much on recovery. And so if we focused on recovery and got the family involved as well, maybe the rate of recidivism in terms of getting arrested for something that has to do with substances would go down, as opposed to being a repeat offender who continues to get punished, continues to have to pay fines, and continues to stay in their addiction with no introduction to the world of recovery. So um, that's my take on that, Di. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I 100% agree with you. And I know that we both agree that, one of our biggest and most difficult challenges is trying to get people to understand that, this is not an easy hurdle to get over. But that if we were to spend a little bit more time and broaden the horizon of giving people an opportunity to actually learn some skill sets instead of just the consequences, which we both also agree they deserve and need to pay, right? But at the same time, what happens is that we see a lot of that part, but when we get to the place of recovery and also teaching families how to stop dancing the same dance as well, because that's what most people that don't have any information or education on exactly how this disease lays itself out. I think it becomes a really challenging one because as soon as they get out, we got the same problem, and we have the same dance. And until the entire family learns a new dance step, um, it's really difficult to be able to see anything. And unfortunately, even we can get on a real rant and tear about this, but even the amount of time that insurance companies will pay to help somebody start the process becomes difficult and challenging. Understanding more and more now about trauma and how it lays itself out and why so many people turn to drugs and alcohol because of trauma-based events also lends a lot to it. How the brain functions and how that operates, and it's no different than a lot of diseases that you and I talk about, right? If someone was a diabetic and they're not eating properly, it doesn't necessarily hurt the family the same way, but it's still a learning and a challenge for the person until they really start to understand the damage that's being done, and the why, right? So I think for, addiction, we get into a lot of not really understanding how this all relates back to the reward system and the limbic brain and a lot of other parts of the body that most people don't take into account and how it affects behaviorally everybody around them.
Yeah, and it's a disease that's kind of like a white tornado is out of control. And then think about, the person that's, trying to control it, that's in it. But how frustrating it is for parents and family members who are trying to control something that is totally out of their control. And but the message is, I really believe that there is no hopeless cases. I mean, we've been doing this for a long, long time. And so I don't want to paint this as, oh my goodness, addiction. And how many parents have we had come in and say, oh, like that, it must be my fault. Or mom,
Right.
it must be my fault. And so that's our rational brains trying to say, oh, okay, well, if I can pinpoint what it is, maybe I can live with this now.
Hmm.
But that's not the case. And so the only thing that we're trying to get is willingness, and willingness can come a bunch of different ways. It can come sometimes from consequences where people wake up. It can come from maybe, if you're a grandparent, that your kids are going to say, no, I don't really want you around here if you're going to be like this around your grandchildren. I mean, whatever it takes, but what has to stick is a willingness. But until you give yourself a chance to stop and stay stopped, you're not going to know. And so um, it's unfortunate that there aren't, more facilities readily available to people. But, and again, touched on what insurance will cover and what they won't cover. But, you and I used to do a thing in group about how much money were you spending on this and how much money were you spending on that and how much were you spending on attorneys and drugs and alcohol. And in a room of 20 people, I mean, it was rarely less than like a couple of $1 million. It was like
Right.
crazy.
It was
So,
crazy. It
um,
was. So yes,
people that are spending, $150 a day to score cocaine, and maybe at some point, like if parents are going to spend money, let's spend it on something to help them get better if they're going to do the right thing.
totally
Obviously,
viable. Totally. Absolutely. And a great point, B. That's a really great point. And we do talk about that a lot. Like, what's the value of this situation? Um, but I think you and I both agree that it goes back to some, formal, people need education and they don't know what to do. And they really feel like they're on an island by themselves. And until you understand that, if we allow people to help and reach out and really get some tools in our tool belt, it is a very lonely existence. And you really do feel like, in my own personal experience, it's horrible. And you don't, and you have so much shame around it, right? Because society still, you know, definitively shames us for having this terrible disease and, the way that it's handled on the other side of the aisle, the family side, right? And so you don't want to tell anybody because you feel so uncomfortable and you don't want the world to know. But the second that you actually say something out loud, you find out so many people have the same problem and have the same family issues and have somebody in their lineage that has had this particular issue. And boy, I don't know, for me, the second I learned that I wasn't alone, I mean, immediately I felt that sense of relief and that I wasn't this leper out there. And I started to get some tools in my toolbox and really some skills and being more open and honest. And I just felt lighter, each time I learned more, said more, didn't live in secrets, all of that. It really made a huge difference in my world. It was amazing.
yeah, it is amazing. And, I wrote a thesis when I was working towards my doctorate on the financial cost of addictive disorders. And it was amazing, like people who were incarcerated, out of every dollar that they spent on that inmate, only 5 cents went towards recovery. So I know you and I think the judges are really coming around, and there's some really great attorneys that are coming around that are saying, hey, look, in lieu of locking him up for X amount of time, why don't, would you be open to him doing some sort of recovery so that there's a chance that he doesn't go back to it. And if he doesn't comply, then of course, then the consequences are the consequences, which may be jail time. But I think, and I don't want to get too political here again on my soapbox, but back in Prohibition, they used to say, "Oh, if we can do away with alcohol, there won't be any more alcoholics." Well, guess what? Then there were
Right.
speakeasies. Everybody found alcohol. Then there was the cocaine that was coming into the United States, or the marijuana. If we eliminate the marijuana, if we eliminate the cocaine, and now it's fentanyl, if we eliminate it, well, my experience has been as an addict and as somebody that works with addicts, if we will find a way to change the way we feel.
Right.
So my point is, should we be spending all this money trying to eliminate specific drugs, or should we be spending money trying to rehabilitate people and get them well? So, um, yeah, I was never a cannabis smoker, but if you put me on an island where there was nothing but cannabis, I probably would have
Yeah.
smoked. That changed the way I felt. So,
Well, and
and
that's right, right? Goes back to the whole point of, right, what we have this limbic brain that goes reward system. Once, if
yes,
you happen to have that, that general makeup, your brain is hijacked. It truly is. And, explaining that and helping people understand that, especially the addict, right? I mean, that helped me a lot. I don't know about you when you were in your early stages of recovery, but once I started to see how the brain actually functioned, it was kind of like, oh, holy crow, I really don't have as much control over this thing as I thought I did, because we all thought we could manage it and we couldn't, and it runs out of control. And the only thing it sees is that loop of, I need to get this, because the brain doesn't understand that this is an object, right? Like it's just, I need this. It doesn't
yeah, and we've
know.
been doing it for so long, that
Right.
the impulse side of the brain is way overdeveloped and the adult rational
Exactly.
side hasn't come in and weighed in. So that's what we work on is let's stop, let's put some time and distance, to the point where now you can get to the point where, I don't know if I want to use or I don't want to use because now the adult rational side of the brain is coming in because it's been impeded by the drug and alcohol use. But I mean, on a good note, though, on a great note, I mean, I can't tell you how many families we have seen get better.
Oh, for
And I
sure.
and that's why we live to do this because, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing, but it's just you have to do the work. I was talking to a patient today who fentanyl was his thing, and he's been through treatment. Now he's out the patient. He goes, Brian. He goes, I used to wake up every morning and 90% of my thoughts was, where am I going to get the money? How am I going to get it? What am I going to do? He said, do you know the freedom I feel right now that I don't have to do that anymore? And I said, well, that's what they call in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, a new freedom and a new happiness. And he goes, that's exactly what it is.
It's
So,
awesome.
so
But,
yeah.
same for the family side, right? Because
Yes,
when they
yes,
start to
yes, yeah.
understand, and I'm not talking about the actual drug, because they also start to learn some tools and techniques on how to deal with this, and they feel a new freedom. They don't feel so responsible. They don't feel like it's their place to fix this for somebody else because they understand that they can't, and I can remember being in that, and man, boy, did I try everything. I mean, I tried everything. Um, to the point of really, I mean, obnoxiousness, right? Just trying to be, and I thought I was being helpful. I really did. I thought I was being supportive. I thought um, I was trying to understand, what this other person was going through because I had already gone through recovery. And so I figured they got it, like of course they get it, right? But no, they weren't there yet. And, you know, it went from bad to worse and, the feelings that you have. But when I learned how to separate myself from the disease of addiction and help myself, like, learn what I needed to do to take care of me, even in the middle of a quote unquote shitstorm, um, I was able to live a different life. And we were now in the process of learning and teaching. So it's a great reward when we see people, the family members, and of course we love it when the addict or alcoholic also understands it. But when we can see people at peace within themselves again and being able to thrive, not just survive, because recovery, at least from my vantage point, no matter who you are, gives you so many wonderful, beneficial, abilities and areas of life to be able that you never dreamed you even had. And I mean, just much healthier ways of doing life. And so it's always a wonderful, a wonderful thing to see anybody start to get the whole message.
Yeah, I mean, the physical, mental, spiritual comes back, and the family doesn't realize they get addicted to the addict, and then they get addicted to the addiction
Exactly.
without
Oh,
outside of their awareness, so they don't know what's going on. So that's why,
yep.
we encourage you to get help. If you want, you can call us. You can get a free consultation, but please don't just sit in that place of waiting for your loved one to get better, to have your happiness contingent upon, and your life stuck. You're just frozen. But sometimes you need a little help, a little hand holding. You need some people who have walked the walk through this journey that can, give you some suggestions that we know will be helpful if you do them. So um, that's probably a wrap for this podcast. We do have the Family Survival Kit on familyandaddictionexperts.com. You can also email us at info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. We can get back to you on that. You know where our podcast is. And I think didn't the podcast on the website too? I think, you can access it from there as well.
Right.
So,
All those wonderful places, YouTube, Spotify, yeah, etc. So it's a great thing. It is a great thing. So this is Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. And Bri, as always, thank you, and wonderful to spend some time with you.
same with you, Di. And I will see you manana.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Thanks so much for joining our podcast, Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more important tools, techniques, and ways for you to focus on you instead of the alcoholic or addict in your world.
Until then, please go to our website, familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's familyandaddictionexperts.com. You'll also see links to our Facebook and Instagram pages. Please also, if you have any emails that you would like to send us, that's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. With any thoughts, feelings, questions that you may have for us, we would love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Unlock the keys to your recovery today. Visit recoverykeys.org or call 904-551-1394.